Hello, everyone. Okay. So, kind of did some thinking. I made a game. Let me launch the. Give me a second. There we go. So, I kind of designed a little game. It is very inspired by Clash Royale and auto battlers like Dota, Underlords, TFT. So, what I have here is a 14 by 20 playing field, a board, and I have two players playing. So the red player and the blue player. And these squares here are the sentinels for each player. And the sentinels are basically your tower. And these are the goal. If you kill the enemy sentinel, you win. And what happens is, so like in Clash Royale, um, the towers are stationary. They stay all the way in the back on opposite ends of the board, and they don't move. But what I did is, if you know, what's it called? There's a game called Gigantic, where like the towers are not actually towers, but they're creatures, and they fight each other and they move around. I kind of got inspired by that a little bit, and then I did this. You start off from the opposite edges of the board, and every uh, X amount of seconds, the sentinel gets up and moves forward by 1 unit, and then it stays for there for a while, and then again, it moves up. It stays here, moves up, stays here, moves up, stays here, moves up, and then they meet in the middle. And that's when they start attacking each other. And this is basically my timer for the game. So instead of having a timer counting down at the top of the screen, I use sentinels to show the progression of the game. And if you noticed, there's this red area. So the red area and the blue area, they start off as uh, 4 by 14 tiles. And this is basically the area you can spawn your units in. You spawn your unit, like let's say you spawn it here. That unit starts moving up like this, and then once it reaches, once it detects the sentinel, it starts attacking the sentinel. And I'm thinking most of the units would behave pretty similar in terms of their like movement. They would just go forward, and then once they reach around this area, they would like turn around and then start moving towards the sentinel and attacking it. But when the sentinel moves forward, it also increases the area of where you can spawn your units. At the same time, it decreases the distance between uh, the two sentinels and the two spawning areas, right? So if we're all the way here, you can spawn your unit here, and then the blue team can spawn it right here, and then it just becomes like very hectic, very twitchy, I think is the word. So like you have to respond very quickly to your opponent's units, right? Because like this spawns this. If you don't respond immediately, he can attack your sentinel and you can die. And your sentinel's already taking damage because they're fighting. The two sentinels are fighting and damaging each other. So that's the general idea of the game. Um, started creating a grid script that would like define the size of the board, um, which tiles are like occupied or not. I was doing that yesterday. Um, so this is the script. It has just two variables, nothing else. I made this and then I stopped because it was getting late. Let's see. Okay. So there's a board dimension and there's a tile size. Tile size is like the absolute size of each tile, and then dimensions are how many tiles there are on the x and y axis. And the grid is the only purpose of the grid is to contain the information about each tile. And then I'm going to create a pathfinding script. It's going to read, it's going to have a reference to the grid in the scene, and then it's going to look at all the tiles, and it's going to figure out like which path to take, and that's going to be the pathfinding. I hope my voice isn't too low. Test public partial class grid. Okay, I think it's good. Okay. So I need to have another variable to hold the tiles. But I'm thinking how that would work. Because I'm thinking of implementing a flow, what's it called? Like a flow pathfinding? Flow field pathfinding? Yeah, like a flow field pathfinding, which each tile will have each tile would have information about, would have a vector 2 that would say, that would be a direction, and it would point at where that unit is trying to go to. But my problem is, like, what if two units have two different targets, so they can't use the same tile because there's only one variable per tile that contains a direction. So I would need to create copies. That might mean I would create multiple grids. Okay. So flow field generates a direction for every single tile given a target point. That means every single, let me type it here. Flow field generates a direction to the target from every single tile. I think that could have been written better, but that's okay. That means we can use the same flow field data for all units that have the same target. That would also mean that we can have some kind of manager and have a manager script that contains all targets and distributes data to the units. Okay. So in that case, that still doesn't help me figure out where the direction should be. Should it be on the tile? Or should I create a new class? Because I'm going to be creating these on runtime. I'm not sure. Not sure what to do. Okay, the grid's supposed to have dimensions. It's supposed to have the tile size. And it's supposed to contain information about each tile, whether or not they're occupied. And then what if I then copy this class or the object I'm overthinking this. I'm just going to add a vector2. Should be a vector2 int. Probably. I don't think it really matters, but vector2 int. I'm going to call this direction. And we need to set it here. Vector2 I direction. And I want to set a default value. Vector2. Okay, now I'm thinking of a new thing. So enemies or the opponent and the player go opposite ways by default. The opponent goes downwards and the player goes upwards. Because I was going to set direction to vector2 up by default, but that doesn't work for the opponent. So I have to create a copy. So does that mean I wouldn't have a default grid in the scene, but I would generate it in runtime? So every start of the game, I would generate one grid for as a default for the player and one grid as a default for the opponent. And that would act as like a fallback grid. So if they don't have a target, they just move forward. Okay. I'm gonna go back to Godot and create a script. And I don't know what to call it. Grid manager. Well, how does players work? Well, it's not a multiplayer game anyway, so I don't really need to deal with any of the player stuff. So it would have an ID. Okay, I'm just gonna call this grid manager. Yeah, the node object. Sure. Do I want it in my scene or do I want it to just be an object? I think, yeah, I have to reference the board manager, so it should be a node and it should be, no, whatever those are. Doesn't matter. Create this. Oh, I was waiting for it to open up. I'll just click on it. All right, the grid manager. Let me set it up in Godot first. So we're not gonna have a board anymore. Well, do I need to... Hold on. Do I need to have... occupied information? Because let's say I detect... like when the unit makes a request to find a path to a target. And at that point, I would generate, for each tile, I would check if there's anything in it. or not. And then I would say, hey, this is occupied or this is not occupied. Then I would create the flow field from that. But what if I just use a direction instead of a direction inside the occupied tile that points to the outside of that tile, like points to the other direction, so that it comes out. Like any unit that was inside that occupied tile, if it follows the tile's direction, it would come out. I'm gonna delete that anyways. Okay, so board. Okay, in that case, it doesn't have to be a node. It doesn't even have to be anything. It doesn't even have to be partial. Okay. Okay, so each tile does contain a direction. I'm going to add that. Vector 2 and direction equals new vector 2. I'm going to make the default one up. What happened? Doesn't exist? What? Okay, then I'll make 0, 1. What is it complaining about? Compile time constant. Can I add it here? Is that new vector 2? Okay, I guess it really doesn't exist. Right, I don't need to define a default here then. I can define occupied default, so false by default. this dot direction equals direction. Well, now I'm thinking, does grid, the class grid, need to know what its tile size is? Or would the grid manager like create an instance of grid and figure out everything, and the grid would only contain the tiles? That kind of makes sense to me. Okay, I'm gonna try doing that. I'm gonna move everything over to here. I'm going to create a new I want a dynamic array. I think Godot collections array would be dynamic. Now we have variant type elements allocated in the engine in C++. Interfacing with the engine. Oh, should I just use system array then? Can I create dynamic arrays in C#? I don't need them to be dynamic. Okay, tile array, an array of tiles. That works, I guess. And it's not defined yet, so I can... Does this create a pointer to it? How does it work in C#? Maybe grid isn't the right word for it. Maybe like something like flow grid. And then flow tile. Whatever. I'll just stick to the name I have. Okay, we have a grid which contains tiles. And I would generate the tiles. Make that public for now. I generate the tiles in the grid manager. I would. I would have some kind of map. How do maps work in C# system? It's not the kind of map I'm talking about. For dictionaries, what is it called in C#? Dictionary. C# doesn't have any built-in maps. The maps is the concept that provides the functionality to map the value of the key inside the dictionary. So map is used inside the dictionary for mapping the key value pair. So let's quickly go through the statement that we're going to solve today. Bruh. Okay. I don't know which one to use. Because the idea is I would have one grid per target. And then whenever a unit requests a grid for a target, would check if the dictionary already has a grid for that target, and it would send that grid. I wonder how pointers work in C#. Because I don't want to just send like a copy. I want it to be a reference. Okay, whatever. Dictionary. What is it complaining about? Dictionary. This would be a node 2D. Because I just need a transform. Yeah, I need a node 2D. I need a reference to a node 2D. And I need to get the transform from that. I need to convert that into a tile. And then I need to build a flow grid from that information. I guess that one makes sense. So node 2D and grid. I'll call this grids. Here it would be public grid. Get grid to target. And then I would pass in a new 2D called target. What's going on here? Okay, there. And then it's complaining I'm not returning anything. Return null for now. Maybe I can check if target is valid or not somehow. Is this good enough? If target, no. Can do null. Target is null, return null. Else, we check if grids already contains out grid value. Yeah, we can use this probably. Try get value target and grid. Let's call this out grid equals null and out grid. And then we can do it. We can put this in an if statement like this. Out keyword. There you go. Maybe just call this grid. Okay, so if there is a value, then we return grid. If it doesn't exist, we create one. That means here I'm going to do private void create grid. You already have the dimension and tile size information. Create grid. Return it from here. Return null. Okay. Grids dot attempts to add and add. We already checked that it doesn't exist, so I guess this will be fine. Grids.add target. And the value is create grid. And this needs to take in information, the target. We should be able to access the location position. Okay, good. Still complaining. That's because of this. You can do grid equals create grid and then pass that in, then return grid. Okay. That looks good to me. We need to actually create the grid now. We need a starting point. Like, where's the origin of the grid? And set it to grid manager. Let's do that for now. Let's just take grid managers. Well, grid managers in 2D. I can make it 2D. I think that fixes it. Let's call that vector 2 origin, not origin. Start position equals this dot position there equals position. We represent tiles as an array. That means if we have information about the dimensions of the grid, we can figure out how to move through the array, through the one-dimensional array. Let's say this is our grid. Say this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're at 6. To go up, we subtract 4. Because it's 4 tiles wide. Right? So if it was 5 tiles wide, it would be 4, 5, 6, 7. And we would have to subtract 5 to get to 2 because it's 5 tiles wide. Okay, that makes sense. Let's note that down. we want to go right, we add 1. Want to go left, we subtract 1, but there are edge cases. Same with moving up. There's always edge cases because you can't go up from 2. If I do 7 plus 1, that's 8. And then do like a modulus operator. That would take me back to 0. That means, okay. So I don't need to do anything like that. I just need to check if this is on the edge. If it is on the edge, then I'm just going to say, no, you can't go right. Don't do anything. And how do I detect it's on the edge? I can do I can check if P for position is smaller than dimension.x. That would check for these. If it is, we're on the edge. Then I can say or if P minus 4 or is it plus 4? Plus 4. Yeah, it should be plus 4. P plus 4, so 8 plus 4 is 12. If that is bigger than that's bigger than the array bounds. So we checked for the top one, the bottom one. Now we gotta do position mod dimension.x. For dimension.x is 4. If p is 4, it turns out to be 0. If it's 8, it's 0. If this equals 0, that means we're on the left side. We can do or p how's this one? We're checking for dimension y maybe. So if I do 3, no, it doesn't work. I can just do then p plus 1 mod dx equals 0. So p plus 1, 3 plus 1 is 4. That checks out. 8 checks out. 12 also checks out. Okay. I guess that's how I check for bounds. I'm gonna go here. I just want to have this function somewhere so I don't forget about it. Well, actually maybe not. I'll just save this and then actually look at it when I need it.